What looked like a simple collaboration has now turned into one of hip-hop's biggest behind-the-scenes mysteries. NLE Choppa allegedly being replaced by NBA YoungBoy on a Coi Leray track has sparked claims of tension, miscommunication, and hidden industry moves. But with no official explanation, silence is fueling even bigger questions. Was this just business, or something deeper happening behind closed doors? What started as a simple collaboration has now turned into one of the most talked about behind-the-scenes shakeups in hip-hop, and nobody saw it coming. At first, it looked like just another record in the making, a powerful link-up meant to bring different fan bases together. Nothing unusual, nothing controversial, until, allegedly, everything changed in silence. Reports suggest NLE Choppa was originally locked in for a major feature connected to a track involving Coi Leray. Early versions of the record were already being shaped, and everything reportedly felt aligned: energy, direction, even rollout plans. Fans had no idea a switch was coming. Then suddenly, without any public explanation, things shifted. Whispers began circulating that NLE Choppa was quietly removed from the track and replaced by NBA YoungBoy. And that's where the situation allegedly exploded behind the scenes. Because it wasn't just seen as a simple creative decision anymore. According to industry chatter, Choppa didn't take it lightly. The move, fair or not, was interpreted by some as being blindsided. No clear communication, no direct explanation, just a quiet replacement that left room for assumptions. And in an industry where respect and credit matter just as much as the music itself, silence can feel louder than words. Almost immediately, fans started noticing tension where there was none before: cryptic posts, subtle messages, online speculation picking apart every detail. Screenshots started circulating and theories multiplied fast. Was this just business or something more personal? On the other side of it, NBA YoungBoy's involvement only intensified the conversation. Not because of direct conflict, but because of what his name represents in the industry: massive influence, strong fan loyalty, and the ability to instantly shift a track's momentum. To some, it looked like a strategic upgrade. To others, it looked like a replacement that carried weight beyond music. And in situations like this, perception spreads faster than truth. Coi Leray's position in all of this adds another layer. As the artist tied to the record's direction, every feature choice, every version change, every final decision becomes part of a larger industry puzzle, one the public rarely gets the full picture of. Because in reality, songs don't just change overnight. They go through versions, negotiations, label input, timing decisions, and last-minute adjustments that fans almost never see. But what made this situation different is the silence around it. No clear explanation, no official breakdown, just a sudden change that left room for speculation to take over completely. And once that happens in the internet age, the story stops being just about music. It becomes about loyalty, respect, and hidden tension. Now the real question being asked everywhere is simple. Was this just a standard industry switch? Or did something happen behind closed doors that forced NLE Choppa out of the picture? Because according to insiders, this might not be the end of the story. It might only be the beginning of a much bigger fallout that hasn't fully surfaced yet. Being replaced on a track isn't rare in the music industry, but the way it happens can be the difference between a smooth switch and a public storm that refuses to die down. And now, NBA YoungBoy finds himself pulled into a situation that may never have involved him directly at the beginning, but is now completely surrounded by attention, speculation, and comparison. His name attached to the record didn't just shift the sound of the track, it shifted the entire conversation around it. At the same time, Coi Leray remains right at the center of everything. Because in situations like this, it's the artist attached to the record who ends up carrying every decision, planned or unplanned, confirmed or rumored. And this is where things start to get heavier. Hip-hop has a long history of last-minute feature changes, surprise removals, and unannounced switches. It happens more often than fans realize. But when those changes involve major names with loyal fan bases, it stops being just about music. It becomes about respect, about status, about who belongs where. And according to early industry chatter, this wasn't just a routine adjustment. It may have been the moment that quietly triggered a chain reaction nobody was prepared for. Because behind the scenes, tensions were allegedly already building long before the public noticed anything was wrong. Then came the turning point. Reports suggest the track featuring NLE Choppa had already reached an advanced stage of production. Everything was close to final. The structure, the feature placement, even expectations around the rollout already in motion. And then quietly, the change happened. Choppa was allegedly removed from the record. Replaced. No public rollout, no clear explanation, just a sudden shift that left room for speculation to take over almost instantly. And what made it worse, according to unverified insider claims, was how he reportedly found out. Not through an official conversation, not through direct communication, but indirectly through secondary channels. In an industry built on timing, trust, and transparency, that kind of situation can hit differently, not just professionally, but personally. Almost immediately after, fans began noticing a shift in tone online. Cryptic posts, short captions, vague messages that didn't name anyone but didn't need to. Because the internet does what it always does. It starts connecting dots whether they fully exist or not. One alleged post suggested feelings of being overlooked. Another hinted at loyalty not being valued. Nothing confirmed, nothing officially addressed, but enough for fans to start building their own narrative. And once that happens, the story stops belonging to the studio. It belongs to the internet. Meanwhile, NBA YoungBoy's involvement started gaining traction fast, not because of any direct conflict, but because of what his presence represented. A different energy, a different audience reach, a different level of streaming power. To some listeners, it looked like a smart strategic upgrade. To others, it looked like someone being replaced. And that's where the conversation split in two. One side called it business. The other called it disrespect. And in the middle of all of this, Coi Leray's name kept getting pulled deeper into the discussion, not as the cause, but as the point where all decisions converge. Because in collaborative music, even when one artist isn't directly involved in the controversy, the record itself becomes the battleground. But what really escalated things wasn't just the change. It was the silence. No official breakdown, no clarification, no joint explanation. And in that silence, speculation didn't just grow, it multiplied. Inside fan communities, debates turned intense, threads filled with theories, edits dissecting timelines, comments splitting into arguments over intent versus impact. And the longer there were no answers, the more assumptions started hardening into truth in the eyes of the public. Then came a deeper layer of speculation. Some insiders began hinting that this wasn't purely a label decision at all. Instead, whispers suggested there may have been creative disagreements, branding conflicts, or internal differences that never reached the public surface. If even partially true, that changes everything. Because now, it's no longer just about a feature being swapped. It becomes about communication breakdowns, misaligned expectations, and decisions made behind closed doors that one side may not have fully agreed with, or even been properly informed about. And that's where the situation shifts from industry routine into something much more volatile. As discussions grew louder online, the pressure only increased. Fan pages started tagging artists directly. Clips spread faster. Every detail was reanalyzed in real time. And with no official statement to anchor the truth, perception started filling in all the gaps. Until eventually, the conversation wasn't just about a song anymore. It was about loyalty, respect, and whether this was simply business or the start of a much bigger divide that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. And just when it seemed like the narrative had already reached its peak, a new wave of claims began surfacing, suggesting the full story behind the replacement may be far more complicated than anyone initially believed. According to additional unverified insider chatter, the situation may have been far more complex than a simple replacement on a track. Instead of one final version being locked in from the start, some reports suggest there may have been multiple evolving versions of the song circulating internally, each with different feature combinations being tested as the record developed. And if that's true, it completely changes how this story is being interpreted. Because now, rather than a sudden removal of NLE Choppa, some insiders hint it may have been part of a shifting creative process, where artists were added or removed as the direction of the track changed in real time. In that version of events, it wasn't personal at first. It was strategy, a pivot in sound, tone, and audience targeting. But even if that explains the process, it doesn't erase the reaction it allegedly triggered. At the same time, NBA YoungBoy's involvement started looking less like a random replacement and more like a calculated move. A move that potentially aligned the track with a different sonic direction and a much larger commercial reach. Because when you attach an artist like NBA YoungBoy, you don't just change the feature list, you change the entire weight of the record. His fan base alone brings massive streaming power, instant engagement, and chart impact. And according to some industry chatter, that level of influence may have played a role in how the final decision leaned. But that's the situation takes a sharper turn. Alleged leaked comments began circulating online, suggesting that NLE Choppa felt blindsided, not just by the change itself, but by how it was communicated. Or more accurately, how it wasn't communicated. And even though nothing has been officially confirmed, that detail alone shifted the entire public perception. Because now the conversation wasn't just about music decisions anymore. It was about communication, trust, and whether everyone involved was actually on the same page. On social media, the reaction was immediate. Fans began breaking everything down in real time: timelines, snippets, old interactions, and every possible clue that could explain what really happened behind the scenes. And as theories spread, one idea started gaining traction. This wasn't just a creative shuffle. It might have been influenced by deeper industry mechanics, label priorities, marketing strategy, and internal negotiations that the public never sees. One viral post summed up the mood bluntly. Nothing about this is random. Features change when leverage changes. While unverified, statements like that only poured fuel on the fire. And suddenly, the fanbase split in two. One side argued NLE Choppa was disrespected, removed without acknowledgement, despite his consistency, work ethic, and loyal fan support. The other side defended NBA YoungBoy's involvement, pointing to his undeniable dominance in streaming, cultural influence, and commercial performance, arguing the final version of the track was stronger because of him. What started as a feature swap turned into a full-scale comparison between two major artists. And once that happens, the music stops being the main focus. The personalities take over. Meanwhile, attention shifted back to NLE Choppa's online activity. Nothing direct, no official statement, but fans began analyzing everything: likes, reposts, timing of posts, even short captions that felt too specific to ignore. To supporters, it looked like subtle frustration being expressed without actually naming names. To others, it was just coincidence being overinterpreted. But in situations like this, interpretation is everything. Because silence leaves space, and the internet always fills it. As commentary videos, breakdown threads, and reaction clips started multiplying, the situation grew far beyond the original track. Now it was about respect in the industry, about credit, about how artists are treated when decisions change at the last minute. Even insiders who downplayed the situation admitted one key thing. While feature changes are normal, how they're handled behind the scenes determines whether they stay professional or become public controversy. And in this case, the lack of clarity became the biggest trigger of all. No full explanation, no coordinated statement, no clear narrative from any side. Just silence. And that silence didn't calm the story, it expanded it. Memes, edits, theories, and speculative breakdowns spread across platforms, turning a behind-the-scenes industry decision into a viral cultural moment. At this point, the situation wasn't just about who was on the track anymore. It was about perception, power, and the growing space between what actually happened and what the internet believes happened. It was no longer just about a track, a feature swap, or even a behind-the-scenes disagreement. In the eyes of the fans, it had become something much bigger. A symbol of control, of respect, of transparency or the lack of it, and more importantly, a reminder of how unpredictable the music industry can be when decisions are made behind closed doors. But just when the conversation seemed like it might settle down, just when people thought they had pieced together the story in their own way, a new wave of claims began circulating. And this time, it didn't just add details. It threatened to completely rewrite everything again. Because according to emerging whispers from unverified insider chatter, there may be one final piece of the puzzle that the public hasn't fully seen yet. And if it's true, it changes everything once more. Just when the narrative started forming a familiar shape online, replacement, reaction, backlash, fan division, a new layer of speculation hit the conversation and disrupted the entire storyline. Reports began suggesting that the situation around the track may not have been driven by a single decision at all. Instead, there may have been something far more complicated happening behind the scenes. Some insiders now claim the final lineup of the song could have been influenced by contractual obligations, scheduling conflicts, and label-level decisions that were never made public. Not personal conflict, not direct disagreement, but industry logistics operating in the background, quietly shaping outcomes while the public only sees the final result. And if that version holds even partial truth, then the entire narrative shifts again. Because now this is Jew. It's not about someone being removed. It's about how many invisible forces can influence a single creative decision. But then comes the twist that reignited everything. Another set of whispers began to surface suggesting that NLE Choppa may have actually been aware of changes happening to the track earlier than fans originally believed. However, the key detail lies in how that information was communicated. Or more accurately, how it may not have been communicated in a way that matched expectations. Because in the music industry, timing is everything. A message delivered too late, too vaguely, or through the wrong channel can completely change how it's received. And if those claims are even partially accurate, then what looked like a sudden replacement might actually have been a slow breakdown in coordination, small misalignments stacking up over time until the final version of the track no longer matched what was originally expected. That idea reframes everything. Because instead of a dramatic, single moment of removal, the reality may have been far more gradual. a series of evolving decisions, shifting creative direction, and communication gaps that widened until they became impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, NBA YoungBoy's name remains attached to the final version of the record, but even that detail is now being reinterpreted under a different lens. Because according to newer speculation, his involvement may not have been directly tied to Choppa's exit at all. Instead, it may have come from a separate stage in the decision-making process, a parallel creative direction, a different consideration entirely, which means the two events, the removal of one artist and the addition of another, may not be as directly connected as the internet originally assumed. But perception doesn't wait for clarity. Once fans saw one name disappear and another appear, the conclusion was immediate. A swap had happened. A replacement had taken place. And that narrative spread faster than any official explanation ever could. Because in the absence of confirmed details, the simplest story is always the one that wins first. And from there, everything escalated. Social media platform turned into investigation boards. Every post became evidence. Every caption became a clue. Every timing detail became a theory. Fans started building timelines from fragmented information, comparing snippets, analyzing old interactions, and trying to reconstruct what might have happened behind closed studio doors. But the deeper they went, the more complicated the story became. Because nothing aligned perfectly. No single version explained everything cleanly. And that uncertainty became the fuel for even more discussion. One side of the conversation saw it as a standard industry process that simply wasn't communicated clearly. They argued that songs evolve constantly, and artists are frequently added or removed as direction shifts. To them, this wasn't unusual. It was just invisible until it became public. But the other side saw something different entirely. They saw disrespect. They saw a lack of acknowledgement. They saw an artist being quietly removed without direct communication or public clarification. And once that interpretation took hold, the debate stopped being about music. It became about fairness, about recognition, about how artists are treated when decisions are made without them in the room. NBA YoungBoy's supporters entered the conversation with equal force. They pointed to his influence, his streaming dominance, and his consistent ability to elevate records to a higher commercial level. To them, his inclusion wasn't controversial, it was strategic. A move that strengthened the track both culturally and commercially. And that's where the divide deepened. Because now it wasn't just a situation anymore. It was a comparison. Artist versus artist. Impact versus intent. Perception versus process. And once that happens, the original context almost disappears completely. But perhaps the most intense part of the entire situation came from what wasn't said. No full statement. No detailed clarification. No joint explanation from any party involved. Just silence. And in the entertainment world, silence is never neutral. It creates space. And that space gets filled immediately. With theories, with interpretations, with narratives that grow stronger the longer they remain unchallenged. Inside industry circles, reactions were reportedly more measured. Some viewed the situation as routine, another example of how creative direction evolves during the final stages of production. Others acknowledged something more important. Even normal industry changes can become major controversies if communication isn't handled carefully. Because perception doesn't operate on internal logic. It operates on what the public can see. And in this case, the public only saw the final result, not the process behind it. That gap is exactly where the controversy was born. As the discussion in and sci-fi, the situation stopped being contained within music spaces. It spread across platforms, X, Instagram, TikTok, where it transformed into a full-scale cultural debate. Memes appeared. Breakdowns were posted. Reaction videos multiplied. Every new angle added another layer to an already overloaded narrative. And with each layer, the original facts mattered less than the interpretation. Even fans who weren't initially invested found themselves pulled into the conversation, not because of the track itself, but because of what it represented. How decisions are made, who gets credited, who gets replaced, and how little transparency exists when changes happen behind the scenes. Then came the final wave of speculation that pushed the story even further. Some whispers suggested that the situation may have involved a mix of overlapping factors, creative direction changes, scheduling conflicts, and internal coordination issues happening simultaneously. Not one cause, multiple causes intersecting at once. And if that's true, then the story isn't about one decision at all. It's about a chain of decisions happening out of sync, which would explain why different perspectives exist depending on who is telling the story. Because from one angle, it looks like a replacement. From another, it looks like a restructure. From another, it looks like timing. And from another, it looks like miscommunication. All of them can exist at the same time and still produce confusion. That's what makes this situation so hard to define. There is no single version that has been officially confirmed. No final explanation released to the public. No statement that fully closes the gap between perception and reality. And until that happens, the story continues to evolve on its own. Because in today's industry landscape, narratives don't wait for confirmation. They build themselves in real time. Fan theories become headlines. Headlines become debates. And debates become part of the culture surrounding the music itself. For NLE Choppa, NBA YoungBoy, and Coi Leray, this situation may eventually be clarified, or it may remain one of those industry moments that is permanently shaped more by interpretation than by fact. But right now, what remains clear is simple. The truth, whatever it fully is, has not been completely revealed. And according to ongoing whispers, there may still be details waiting to surface that could reshape the entire understanding of what actually happened. Which leaves one final question hanging over everything. Was this truly a straightforward industry decision that got misunderstood? Or is there still another layer of this story that hasn't been uncovered yet? Because until that answer arrives, this controversy isn't ending. It's evolving,